The respected economist Dr KS Jomo was a part of the 5-member Council of Elders tasked with advising the fledgling Pakatan Harapan government in its first ever term. In part 1 of my interview with Dr Jomo, we discussed mainly local Malaysian issues, including China relations, government debt, revenue sources and the delicate East Malaysia situation. Okay, so within your time in the Council of Elders, you obviously were against its publication for obvious reasons, confidentiality being one of them. What were some of your strongest recommendations put forward to the powers that be?
I think there are two slightly different issues. Okay, the final report which has been submitted was basically finalized by the chairman, and he has every right. I think it is wrong to say that he has no right to submit a report as chairman. And we should be very clear that there are elements in that report which are obviously going to affect Malaysia's diplomatic and other relations, and we should be very careful about that. But there are things which are very uncontroversial or unproblematic and which should be transparent and be fully made available to the public. So the default should be on excising those elements which are which may shackle the government, which may become problems for the government.
Okay, what are the 2 or 3 biggest headaches that Malaysia faces right now?
Well, I think the government has defined for itself the whole question of debt. And I think quite understandably, because there was a huge explosion of debt, not only government debt, which the former Prime Minister is quite correct to say, is defined at a particular level, but more important, there was a doubling of government debt under his watch. And there was a tripling of government guaranteed debt also under his watch. Now, the thing about government guaranteed debt is that it is not subject to parliamentary scrutiny. So a great deal of, well, to put it politely, nonsense could happen and probably did happen under this rubric of government guaranteed debt. The loans, for example, for the building of the ECRL, for the 2 controversial gas pipelines and so on, were all done, and we also now know that they were grossly inflated, the prices involved, and this is hugely problematic because it imposes a burden. What was very smart about the former Prime Minister's dealings was that much of this debt was not immediately felt by the majority of Malaysians. The payments would be deferred and largely would be experienced further down the line. So for example, for the ECRL, there wouldn't be any payments due in the first 7 years. And then the payments would mount, and it was expected in the final version of the project that the entire cost of the ECRL will be in the region of 81 billion.
So you also talked about how Malaysia needs alternative revenue streams, right? Especially to supplant the GST, which has been zeroized. What do you think will move the needle?
I would, generally speaking, favor a shift away from indirect taxation towards direct taxation, towards identifying the areas where direct taxation would not be growth retarding in any way, or to try to ensure that the incentives are there. We give a lot of incentives. Malaysia gives a lot of incentives to foreign investors, for example, and this have accumulated over 5-6 decades. To what end? With very, very little to show for it. There needs to be a review of those fiscal incentives. I'm not sure whether the review has been done by the Ministry of Finance. Many of those things could be gotten rid of without any adversely affecting attracting investors. We also need to think very carefully about whether we are giving too much incentives to foreign investors and not doing enough for domestic investors. Because if you look carefully and critically at Malaysia's economic growth record, including industrialization record, it has largely been domestic investment driven, not foreign investment driven. So we need to begin to rethink about many of our assumptions. These are very popular assumptions which unfortunately many people believe but which have no basis in fact.
Do you have a point of view on how Malaysia should treat the East Malaysia situation, the Sarawak Sabah situation that seems to be deteriorating by the day.
Well, I'm not sure it's deteriorating by the day.
It seems to be.
The very fact that the Pakatan Harapan was elected is testimony to the fact that people in Sabah and Sarawak felt that the Barisan Nasional was not giving them any room. Now, this situation is not a new situation. It is a situation which is at least 55 years old. That's the time Sabah and Sarawak came into the Malaysian
Federation. Since at least MA63.
Yeah.
So now they think that the time is right to try and push through whatever they want.
Well, that's
more parliamentary representation.
That's a very summary view. You know, the elite may have a particular view, or sections of the elite may have a particular view, and other sections of the elite may have very different view. What about the people at large? I'm not so sure that we have a consensus view. I think it is clear that people in Sabah and Sarawak are not very happy with the terms, and more importantly, how it has been interpreted and practiced. Of participating in Malaysia, and these concerns need to be addressed. But I think, judging by the rhetoric of a particular minister, of a particular politician, is not the best way to proceed. I think what we need to get a sense of is what are the misgivings, and long before it became fashionable to do so, some of my students, especially those from Sabah and Sarawak, have been trying to look at these issues. Some of it has been published, some of it is less well known. But let's face it, nobody in Peninsular Malaysia paid any attention to these issues when they were published.